Hello and welcome to the subject of functional grammar, lesson 3 for the students of College of Education, Department of English. As I told you, for this subject, functional grammar, we depend upon Halliday's Introduction to Functional Grammar. That is to say, Halliday's Introduction to Functional Grammar is our reference book for a study of this subject. Before we start the lesson, let's first discuss and review what we have talked about, what we have studied in lesson 1. That is to say, a review of lesson 1. If you recall to your mind, you will come to know that we talked about grammar. That is to say, what is grammar? What do we mean by grammar? We also talked about branches of grammar, and the branches of grammar have two parts: formal or traditional grammar, functional grammar. Then we move on to what is formal or traditional grammar. It has two parts: descriptive grammar, prescriptive grammar. Then descriptive grammar has further two subcategories: word level grammar, sentence level grammar. Then we have prescriptive grammar. Then we talked about difference between descriptive and prescriptive grammar. And the last point we discussed was functional grammar. These are the topics we talked about in detail in our first lesson. Please go back to lesson 1 and try to understand, try to recall all these points to your mind. We move on to the next page, next slide. Now we have the review of lesson 2. So far, what we have studied in lesson 2. So we talked about in lesson 2, if you recall to your mind, that is number 1, what is functional grammar? We talked about text. What is text? Text as an object, text as an instrument, text as artifact or a specimen, text as register. Then we talked about definitions of grammatics and semiosis. So these are the topics we talked in detail, we discussed in detail in our lesson 2. Please go back to lesson 2, try to recall to your mind all these points so that we understand our present lesson in a much better way. Now we have lesson 3. Lesson 3 is about analysis of text at the level of phonology. Look, as I told you, functional grammar is all about analyzing the text. Means looking at the language at the text level, not at the word level, not at the level of just grammar. In a complete text, complete piece of writing, complete compositional level. So our first discussion is lesson 3, analysis of text at the level of phonology. We move on. Look here, a text can be studied at the level of phonology, graphology, and lexico-grammar. So a text can be studied at 3 different levels. The first level is phonology, second level is graphology and lexico-grammar. But lesson 3 will focus only upon phonology. In our next lesson, we can talk about graphology, and thereafter, in the next lesson after that, we can talk about lexico-grammar. So the present lesson is all about analyzing, interpreting the text at the level of phonology. So these are the topics we will discuss. Interpretation of a text at the level of phonology. What we will get at the end of the lesson, what we will achieve at the end of the lesson, what we will understand at the end of the lesson. So these are the following points. After we end our lecture, we will be able to understand all these points. Number one, constituency, and that is the level phonological. The second level is graphological. The third level is lexico-grammatical, that we will discuss later. So constituency, and the first level is phonological, at the level of phonology, that is to say phonological. 1.1 constituency, you will come to know what is constituency. 1.2 phonology. 1.3 line. 1.4 food. 1.5 syllable. 1.6 rhyme. 1.7 onset. 1.8 rank scale. These are the items, these are the terms we will be able to understand by the end of the lesson. So we move on to our actual discussion, actual understanding of what is constituency at the level of phonology. Look here, point number one. Perhaps the most noticeable dimension of language is its compositional structure, known as constituency. Larger units of language consist of smaller ones. Look, the first point is that perhaps the most noticeable dimension of language is its compositional structure. Look here. The most important dimension of language, aspect of language, is its compositional structure. Means any piece of writing, any text, when it is composed, it has its own structure, it has its own shape. You can take it as one piece, and this is known as constituency. Now further, larger units of language consist of smaller ones. Look here, larger units of language, that is to say that if you select a piece of text, a piece of writing, this is a larger units of language. And further, when you take the text, a composition, an essay, a book, a paragraph, and then you can further divide them into smaller units. That is the discussion of the first point. We move on to the point number two. If we listen to any of these texts, to any text, in fact, in its spoken form, we will hear continuous melody with a rising and falling pitch, and with certain moments of prominence marked by either relatively rapid pitch changes or extended pitch intervals. Look here. Point number two is about we always listen to any of the texts. That is to say, any text. In fact, in its spoken form, look, every day, every moment we speak, we share ideas, we listen. When we hear somebody talking, somebody speaking, then what do we find as a linguist or as a student of linguistics, as a student of language? You will hear continuous melody with rising and falling pitch. When somebody speaks, somebody has its own way of speaking, has its own way of delivering the speech, has its own way of what you call style, manner. And that speech also has the rising and falling tone, rising and falling pitch. And with certain moments of prominence, means in our speech, when we talk about, when we speak, we don't speak just at one level. Sometimes we have rising tone, sometimes we have falling tone, rising pitch, falling pitch. Sometimes we have certain moments of prominence, certain moments of loud voice, certain moments of less voice. All these things are part of text when we analyze. Look how a text, how a speech becomes effective. A speech becomes effective not only because it is written or it is spoken. The most important is that how it is spoken, in what manner it is spoken, how it is delivered. There are millions of people, they speak, they deliver a speech, but some of the speeches, some of the sermons by important people. They become very important. Why? Because the delivery of a speech, the delivery of language is so impressive, so beautiful, it touches our heart and mind. That is the point all about in 2. We move on to the next. We continue our discussion, that is to say constituency at the level of phonology, interpreting text at the level of at the level of phonology. Point number 3. These moments of prominence define a snatch of melody, a melodic unit or line, and within this melodic progression, we will be able to pick up a more or less regular beat, defining some rhythmic unit or foot. Look, there are 2 terms, line and foot. At the end of the lesson, I have already given separate definitions for such terms. What I mean to say here is that, look, melodic unit, this is very important. When somebody is speaking and somebody is going through a rising and falling pitch, it creates a melody. It creates a sort of rhythm, that is to say, a line and foot. It makes the text a bit impressive, sweet to listen to, melodious to listen to. So a text contains not only rising and falling pitch, it also contains a melodic unit, that is to say line, and also it has a rhythm within it, what we call a regular beat. The regular beat and melody and rhythm is not only about poetry. Poetry, of course, is particularly for this, but even in our day-to-day conversation and speech, when there is no melody, when there is no rhythm, when there is no connection between the words and there is no harmony between the words and the feelings and the way you speak, then that speech cannot be that much effective. Go to the point number 4. We can perhaps recognize that the line and the foot of our traditional verse meters are simply regularized versions of these properties of ordinary speech. Look here, line and foot, as I told you, they are particularly for our traditional verse meters that we always find in the poetry. But they are not only the parts of poetry. Sometimes those properties can also be interlinked to our ordinary speech of everyday life. That is also important in another way. Because why we are talking about at the level of phonology? When we talk about at the level of phonology, it means that this text must be analyzed how people speak a certain text, how people deliver a certain speech, and why this speech has become more impressive, more entertaining than the rest. And when we talk about a speech, when we talk about a text at a speech level, then all these things come into account of discussion. We move on to the next. Of course, we continue our discussion. Point number 5. Each foot, in turn, is made up of a number of syllables, and each syllable is composed of 2 parts, one of which enables it to rhyme. So each foot is made of a number of syllables. The foot is a very technical word in poetry. Later I will give the definition. What I mean here is to say that each foot is made up of a number of syllables. Number 1 point. And number 2 point here is that each syllable is composed of 2 parts, and one of which is rhyme and another one is onset. So we move on to the point number 6. We refer to this rhyming segment simply as the rhyme. The preceding segment to which it is attached is called onset. So here syllable is composed of 2 parts, and those 2 parts is, one is a rhyme and the other is onset. These 2 terms I will further talk and will give definition at the end of this lecture. Just here keep in mind that foot is made up of a number of syllables, and each syllable is composed of 2 parts. The first part is rhyme and the second part is onset. We continue. Point number 7. Both onset and rhyme can be further analyzed as sequences of consonants and vowels. Consonant and vowel phonemes in technical parlance. So, both onset and rhyme can further be analyzed as sequences of consonants and vowels. Of course, onset and rhyme both contain a number of sequences of consonants and vowels. Without the involvement, without the combination of consonants and vowels, the onset and rhyme cannot be created at all. That is the point number 7. We move on to the next page, next slide, and we continue our discussion. There is a form of order here that we can call constituency, whereby larger units are made up out of smaller ones. A line out of feet, a foot out of syllables, a syllable out of sequences of phonemes. Look at this important, very important point. Look at a form of order that we can call constituency. What is constituency? Constituency is a form of order. Constituency is a larger segment of any text and unit. Putting things in order, putting things in a scientific manner, in a systematic manner, and that we call constituency. Okay. What we find, how this happens, larger units are made up of out of smaller ones. Look here, if you write a book, if you write any piece of composition, or if you analyze any text, so the text is big, we can call it as a larger unit, and that text has further smaller units, smaller ones, smaller steps. Then we have line in any text, and the line is made out of feet, and the foot is made out of syllables, and the syllable is made out of sequences of phonemes. Look here, to understand this part, it is to say that look at a house, how the house is built, how the house is structured. The house is a larger unit. You can further divide it into smaller parts. Then you can talk about bricks, then you can talk about cement, then you can talk about sand, then you can talk about particles. So starting from top to bottom, here the same case is here, that a text is a larger unit, and further you go on dividing till you go to the last point. That is the point here. And the last point of this discussion, we refer to such a hierarchy of units related by constituency as a rank scale, and to each step in the hierarchy as one rank. Here we have a hierarchy of units. We have a hierarchy. Hierarchy means we have the grade, the level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, like this. So hierarchy of units means level of units related by constituency in relation with one another. We call it rank scale, rank 1, rank 2, rank 3. And each step in the hierarchy is known as rank. So rank scale like ladders, like steps going down and down till the last point. And this we call rank. So these are the 9 points. Please keep them in mind. These 9 points have been given in order to help you understand the idea of how a text can be interpreted at the level of phonology. Now we move on to the next slide. Look here. As I told you, what we have discussed so far, we have here terminology. These are the terms we have come across. These are the words, very, very important word, which we have just discussed about. But when we talked about through the text. Now I am describing them individually and separately so that you can memorize them, you can keep them in mind, and this will help you in the examination. Point number 1.1, we talked about constituency. Look here, what is constituency? We talked about in the very beginning of our discussion what is constituency. Constituency here is the compositional structure of language is known as constituency. Compositional structure, how text is composed and what is its structure, what is its hierarchy, what is its level. that level hierarchy structure is known as constituency. So this is the definition of the word constituency. So please keep it in mind and memorize it. We go to the phonology, point number 1.2. Phonology you already know in the discussion of phonetics. But anyway, it is defined as the study of sound patterns and their meanings, both within and across languages, such as phonology of English is different from phonology of Arabic. So, as it is defined, this phonology is the study of sound patterns and their meanings, and that sound patterns and meanings may be within the language or across other languages. So we can say phonology of English, we can say phonology of Arabic, and we can also say phonology of English is different from phonology of Arabic, and so on. So this we call phonology. We move on to the next. 1.3 line we came across while we talked about the melodic unit. What is line? It refers to melodic unit, that is moments of prominence in a speech. So moments of prominence in a speech, when you speak sometimes, it's a technical word. This is not a normal word. This is not a general word, that line of a sentence, just to understand this. This is a technical word, line. Line here refers to melodic unit. It creates melody. And how the melody in a speech is created? Because of the moments of prominence. When we speak, for example, if I say, I am a teacher. What is this? I am a teacher. The same sentence can be spoken. I am a teacher. Look, the moments of prominence means some words, some sounds are prominently pronounced, and it creates melody. It looks beautiful. It looks nice. So line, it refers to melodic unit, that is moments of prominence in a speech. Go to the 1.4 foot. Foot is not the leg that we walk on. This foot is different in language. A foot is a combination of stressed and unstressed syllables, which is repeated a given number of times in a line of verse to establish a meter. So what is foot? Foot is a combination of stressed and unstressed syllables in any piece of writing, in any line, in any sentence, in any poem. And this a foot, which is a combination of stressed and unstressed syllables, this helps in establishing a meter. Meter is very much related to music, melody. Now we move on to the next. 1.5 syllable. You may have heard this word in the discussion of linguistics or syntax. Anyway, come back. A syllable is a part of a word that contains a single vowel sound and that is pronounced as a unit. So, for example, book has one syllable and reading has two syllables. So what is syllable? You must be knowing the definition of syllable, but here as a reminder, it is a part of a word and it must contain a single vowel sound and it must be pronounced as a single unit. And here one example is given. Book, it has one syllable because it has one single vowel. And the reading, it has two vowels, it means it has two syllables. And then syllable has a long discussion, so here we don't want to go into those details. Here we just want to give you the reflection of understanding of following terms so that you understand what is interpretation of text at the level of phonology. Go to the 1.6 rhyme. The repetition of the same or similar sounds, usually at the end of lines in poems or songs, is called rhyme. So for example, time, rhyme, cat, mat. You can further add so many examples, hat, bat, and so on. So rhyme, what is rhyme? Rhyme creates melody, repetition of the same or similar sounds at the end of lines in poems or songs is called rhyme. So repeating of the same and similar sounds at the end of lines in poem or songs, this creates rhyme, this creates melody and music. This is rhyme. We move on to the next. and possibly this could be our last page of discussion. That is to say, onset 1.7 onset. The onset is the initial phonological unit of any word. That is, for example, C in cat, M in mat, S in sat, etc. Look here, onset is the initial phonological unit of any word. Initial means beginning. So onset is the beginning of any phonological unit of any word. For example, if you take the example cat, which letter, which sound appearing first? C. So in the word cat, C is happening, C is coming initially. So this is the initial phonological unit of this word C. So C is the onset of this word. Likewise, M in mat, M is the onset of the word mat. Likewise, in sat, S is the onset of this word sat. So the onset is the initial phonological unit of any word. Look, the onset, it helps children sometimes memorize new words. How? Because look here, there is, if you look at the spelling of cat and mat and sat, what you find? You find that there is AT here also, AT also here, AT also here. In all three words, at the end we have at. How do children will learn the new words? Because of recognizing the initial phonological unit, how it is different from the another, like C in cat, M in mat, S in sat, and these helps children in memorizing the new words. So this is known as onset. Anyway, further we have notification. Note means the important point to keep in mind. This is just for understanding. Onset and rhyme. This rhyme sometimes is spelled RHYME or sometimes is spelled as RIME. So both are the same, no problem. Onset and rhyme are terms that technically describe the phonological units of a spoken syllable. Syllables are normally split up into two parts. Remember, syllables are normally split, divided, separated into two parts. And the one part is called the onset and the other part is called rhyme. Okay, and the last point of our lecture is 1.8 rank scale. A hierarchy of units related by constituency is known as a rank scale. This is may not be visible, but this is a rank scale. A hierarchy of units related by constituency is known as a rank scale. As I told you that, what is rank scale? Rank scale is a hierarchy of units. A text, as I told you, is a bigger unit. Then you go on dividing it into different hierarchies, different labels. So rank scale, a hierarchy of units, and this is related by constituency, and this we call rank scale. So these are the terms, 8 terms. You must keep them in mind, you must memorize them, and after you memorize these terms, go back to the text we have discussed about, so that you can understand the philosophy of what is discussion about interpretation of text at the level of phonology. Now it is time to talk about questions. Of course, it's important. Questions number 1. What are the terms used to interpret text at the level of phonology? Write the name of terms only. Do not explain. Here I am just asking, just write the terms. And you know what are the terms? We have the 8 terms we have used. We have line, we have foot, we have syllables, we have constituency, we have phonology, we have hierarchy, and so on. Just write the names. Okay? Don't explain, because here I am not asking question to explain. Do not explain. So write all the 8 terms used to interpret text at the level of phonology. Move on to the next. Questions type 2. Explain the following terms used to interpret text at the level of phonology. These are the terms we discussed about at the end of our lecture. Like, what is constituency? Explain. What is foot? Explain. What is syllable? Explain. Onset, rhyme, rank scale, line, phonology. Look here I have given questions 8 because they are all we have discussed. In the exam, I may ask you to explain 2 of them, 3 of them, 5 of them, 8 of them, depending upon the situation. So your job is to memorize all the 8 terms of this lesson, and in the examination you will be safe. If I ask all of them or 5 of them, you will have no problem to write the answer. Okay, so this is, I hope, the end of our lesson 3. Hope you have understood. Try to go back to lesson 1, lesson 2, and this is lesson 3, and try to interrelate each lesson with one another. So thank you very much. Goodbye.